I cannot see how many people are in here. I'm assuming that there's enough. 67. Wow. Okay.
We're good to go.
We are good to go. That is excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear. All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm very glad to see so many people on the call today. 69. We're going up. And glad to see so many people invested in the future of Nebraska. If you haven't had a chance to read our final proposal draft yet, we're going to break down what's in there. If you have, hopefully we will address any questions you might have had. However, for today's town hall, we will not be taking questions on the town hall, so please do continue to send us those in writing. We appreciate everyone that's done so thus far. It's been fantastic. Before we get going, I do want to let everyone know that this call will be recorded and will be posted to our website later this week in case you want to go back and re-watch me. Slide 2. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. As I mentioned today, we're going to go over the final proposal draft and also provisional subgrants. I can't emphasize enough that these are draft documents pending NTIA approval. NTIA may reject any subgrant they do not believe benefits the program or is not fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. We will first go over briefly how we got here, specifically the recent changes to the BEAD program and those impacts. Then we will look at the outcome of those changes and the efforts our office has made to maximize the benefits of our funding to Nebraska. Most importantly, we will look at the provisional subgrants to the Broadband Serviceable Locations, or BSLs, and then we will talk about our community anchor institutions, or CAIs, and the accomplishments we made there, which is going to be probably the first time you guys have heard about that from us on one of these town halls. Then we'll cover a summary of all of our provisional subgrants and our next steps, which will be very exciting. So I'm going to go through these chronologically. First up, the changes to the BEAD program concerning the RPN. Back in June, NTIA released a revised policy notice, which I've already called the RPN. This introduced major changes to both our map inventory and scoring criteria. One of the big implications from the RPN was that it required us to put all locations back on the table for what they call the benefit of the bargain round, or we call it just the Bob round. It also meant that what this means basically is that anything that we did in the first round, which our director and the rest of the office calls the Nebraska round, basically means that none of those applications could be carried forward. Gave us a lot of really good information, which we appreciate, but you'll understand further as I get into the information exactly why it was unfeasible for us to carry those forward. We basically had to kind of start over. Also gave us a 90-day clock, which is extremely aggressive, to complete and submit our final proposal. Our BEAD eligible locations, which were previously just under 30,000 locations, were to be refined as a result of this RPN. The RPN required to remove locations that are considered served with access to 100 over 20 megabits per second from our inventory. And NTA also provided us with a list of locations that were defaulted from federal broadband deployment programs to add to the map, given they weren't served by another provider. Excuse me. Next, we were then asked to verify any state or federal programs and their service levels so that we weren't spending taxpayer dollars to any locations twice. One of the big ones that we had to do was verify unlicensed fixed wireless service on our map. And we took off about 7,500 locations as a result, or about half of our removed locations. We were planning on doing this specific cleanup later on in the program, and therefore we had already collected the data and it had been approved by NTA. However, the RPN required us to make this adjustment now before running the benefit of the bargain round. Finally, we had to verify that all locations had a service level in the latest FCC fabric. And for reference to everybody, we ran the challenge process quite some time ago at this point, which is wild, on version 3.2, then trued up to version 4 last summer, And since then, the map has been updated to version 6. As a result, approximately 7,000 locations of our previous inventory now either reflect service or no longer exist on the fabric. And this itself is a great testimony to our providers in Nebraska and the private investment they have all made. So thank you all to all of our providers on the call here today. So let's talk about scoring real quick. The scoring metrics also drastically changed. The RPN outlined what is known as tech neutrality, meaning all technologies were to compete on a level playing field. Simply put, the scores must be calculated on the lowest cost and removed almost any other consideration we could have used from scoring. There were 2 other considerations we could have used if the cost was within 15% of the lowest cost application. And that was the data deployment and the speed of the technology. As a result, during the Bob round, we did see a drastic decrease in participation from our previous round, particularly from our fiber providers, which ultimately led to a marked decrease in provisional fiber awards, as you will see or have seen if you've read our final proposal. Shortly after that, NTA published version 12 of their FAQs. 2.11 is summarized for you here. They give more clarification to the RPN's modified definition of what is a priority broadband project. For us, that means our defined project areas, or DPAs. It outlines that states have some latitude in how they discern priority basis for a particular project area for certain criteria, and just not blanket across the state like it was prior to the RPN. To see how this affected Nebraska, we worked with an engineering firm out of Virginia Tech that specialized in GPS and assessing tree canopy slope and grade as it relates to how conducive certain broadband technologies are to a given project area. The report literally came back to say, "We are sorry your state is so flat and treeless," which fact check true. Next, we then consulted with our local engineering firm that we have, JEO, and they took that data and added BSL density as an additional metric. This examined how many BEAD eligible BSLs were within a given radius within a DPA. From this, we were able to create a 4-tiered priority system. As you can see, the tiers are outlined for what technologies are not conducive to an area within that DPA. Not conducive doesn't mean not applicable, just not as good, based on our analysis from our external firms. Tier 1 was less conducive to low Earth orbit satellite, or LEOs, and fixed wireless solutions. Tier 2 was only less conducive to LEOs. Tier 3 was less conducive to fixed wireless, and Tier 4 was conducive to all technologies. To put this into perspective, after running all of this data with our firms, we ended up with 26 Tier 1 DPAs, 69 Tier 2 DPAs, 23 Tier 3 DPAs, and 59 Tier 4 DPAs. So with that taken care of, we can finally get to what everyone's been waiting for, which is the provisional subgrants. And now I must emphasize again, these are subject to change. They must be approved by NTIA. Should NTIA reject any of our subgrants for any reason, we will have to go back to the drawing board for those BSLs and those DPAs. So without further ado, let's look at a breakdown of our provisional subgrants. We have a couple graphics here that I think are very illustrative. Here you can see what companies won, what areas across the state. We will make these slides available on our website, by the way, if you want to spend more time studying these maps. On our call with NTIA last week, where we previewed our provisional subgrants, they praised us for consideration of fixed wireless solutions as they work well with, again, our I quote, our flat treeless state. We do, in fact, see a lot of what we expected in fiber companies concentrated in high-density areas, along with fixed wireless companies, and then LEO companies primarily taking much of rural Nebraska, which is very clear on this next slide. This map shows how technology will be deployed by technology, not by company. As you can see, there's lots of blue on this map, and that's the licensed fixed wireless. You may see some outliers in that LEO is present even by Omaha in an area that you would assume is a Tier 1 DPA. This typically happens because we simply did not receive a priority project application and therefore had to default back to cost over everything else. Our mandate was to ensure service, period, which is what we did and led to 100% coverage across the state using a mix of technology, which we were always going to have. The mix just looks different than what we had envisioned prior to the RPN. Here we take a deeper dive into these numbers. The colors on the chart line up with the colors on the pie charts. Licensed fixed wireless took the biggest chunks of locations with just over 7,500 BSLs. Fiber has been provisionally subgranted to 1,200 BSLs in Tier 1 project areas. And LEOs cover 4,600 locations at a bargain price, might I add, of under $5 million. You may also be looking at this and wondering why $15 million, or $15, not thousand or million, $15 has been awarded to unlicensed fixed wireless. Well, we had one provider come in with technically $0 applications for those 585 locations. To make our numbers work within our subgrants and our financial system, we've worked it out to $15 total. It's just how we had to make it work. So to get into what I think is perhaps one of our largest successes with this program is our CAIs. This is something we didn't anticipate prior to the RPN, and we didn't think that we were going to have any funding left over for CAIs based on our early calculations. However, looking at the amount of savings that we've had in this program thus far, we are able to target CAIs. And the great thing is about CAIs, or community anchor institutions, is that they are required to be served at gig over gig symmetrical service. That essentially means we're bringing basically fiber typically to a community that may not have fiber infrastructure in it already. When we first posted our CAI inventory for applications, we knew that it likely had locations that were already served. CAIs are a unique animal in that they aren't represented on the FCC fabric like other BSLs. Many don't even have a location ID. So identifying them and their service access isn't easy. We asked for everyone's help to identify those, so we're being good stewards of Nebraska taxpayer, or we're being good stewards of just taxpayer dollars generally, and you all responded in droves. So thank you very, very much for that. We really appreciate it. We've heard from a variety of different people. NTA also outlined with examples in the RPN as well as verbally that we should be cautious of how much funding we allocate to any individual location, CAI or BSL. Based on that, we set a high cost threshold and applied it to the applications we received. Ultimately, we were able to provisionally subgrant gig over gig service to 54 locations. 44 of those are in rural communities defined as populations under 2,000 people. And even better, we were able to connect 24 locations to rural locations designated as fire and safety, which is an invaluable investment in those communities. So I think this is a huge win for the state and for the program as a whole. So, final overview of exactly what our expenditure is on the screen now. With nearly $44 million in NBO funding combined with almost $21 million in matching funds, we are seeing over $64 million invested into Nebraska broadband. This leaves Nebraska with a savings of nearly $344 million from our NTIA allocation of $405 million. There are two possible options with remaining funding, theoretically. We could return it to the federal government to theoretically reduce the federal tax burden, or spend it on non-deployment efforts here in Nebraska. At this point, a decision on what happens with remaining funding is uncertain. We will continue to focus on how the $64 million investment will continue to benefit education, business, agriculture, our economy broadly, and enhance the daily lives of all Nebraskans. So what's next, and what can you guys do? Go ahead and read our final proposal draft and leave us comments. We've already received quite a few, and we really do appreciate them. You can find the proposal on comment form on our website at the address at the bottom of the screen. Right there. Comments close on September 10th, so make sure to get them in before then. Once comments have been reviewed and incorporated as necessary into the final proposal, we will submit it to NTA, who has 90 days to review and respond to us. They'll likely return it to us for curing until it is approved, and we're hoping to get it back much sooner. Once we receive approval, we can execute our subgrants. In the meantime, we are working with companies to satisfy any remaining stipulations, so once we get approval, we can move right into execution of subgrants and get those shovels in the ground as soon as possible. Once subgrants are executed, the deployment phase kicks off and companies can begin working to deployment, which is going to be extremely exciting. So in closing, thank you again for joining us today. I think it's fantastic to see how many people hopped on the call to see what the future of Nebraska looks like. This is an exciting time in our program, and I want to thank you all for your interest and commitment to Nebraska. We couldn't have done this without you, and we look forward to what this funding opportunity will do for the state. Thanks for coming again, and I encourage you to go to our website, leave us a comment on our final proposal draft, and stay tuned for what is next for NBO and Nebraska as a whole. All right. And with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you guys so much for joining us again. Everything is real now. The last couple of years that we've been working to, it's all real, and this is extremely exciting. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing all of your guys' comments in our final proposal draft.